The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. What does it mean for America when a Chinese communist despot, lords over the most populous country on the planet, meets with Islamic theocrat and strengthens the ties that bind the two? That's what's happening today in Saudi Arabia, per the arrival of Chinese communist leader Xi to meet with Saudi Arabian Prince MBS, and they're expected to sign some 20 agreements worth more than $29 billion in business between the two countries. We don't really know the topics or what those agreements entail. Is it in the telecom space? Is it weapons deals? There's Wall Street Journal reported there had been some progress in talks about pricing some Saudi oil sales in yuan, Chinese currency, which is all part of Xi's plan to dominate the world and restore China to the global hegemon he desires it to be. Well, let's get some perspective on this meet. We'll get that from Benedict Rogers, who's the co-founder and chief executive of Hong Kong Watch, and he's the author of The China Nexus. Benedict Rogers, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
And so what about MBS and Xi doing deals and getting closer?
Well, I think it's obviously alarming at any time when two major dictators and authoritarian regimes come together. But it's particularly hypocritical, really, of Saudi Arabia, because Xi Jinping is presiding over what is increasingly recognized by both the previous U.S. administration, the current administration, several other parliaments of different countries, as a genocide of the predominantly Muslim Uyghur people. Right. And yet Saudi Arabia is turning a blind eye to that and doing deals with the perpetrators of that genocide.
Well, right. Although, it's not like MBS has, and the Saudis have a particularly great human rights record. So, there's these are people who believe that other people are just sometimes eggs you got to break.
Yes, that's correct. And but there is a double standard, because not only for Saudi Arabia, but for many of the members of the Organization of Islamic States, the OIC countries, they have spoken out quite rightly on the genocide of the Rohingya people in Burma or Myanmar. They're very quick to speak out on any incident of either perceived or real Islamophobia in the Western world. But when it comes to China, because they're doing business deals, they'll ignore and even deny the genocide of the Uyghurs. So, but you're correct. He's not exactly a defender of human rights anywhere.
Speaking of an actual defender of human rights, Jimmy Lai, who sits in prison, is the story of Jimmy Lai, in your view, is that getting enough attention, particularly as he's scheduled to basically go on a show trial and be in prison for the rest of his life, more likely than not?
It's getting some attention, but I think it certainly deserves a lot more. I mean, he is somebody who is a symbol, really, of Hong Kong's what we saw in the past in Hong Kong in terms of its dynamism, its entrepreneurialism, and its most importantly, its freedom, and being one of Asia's most open societies. In the last couple of years, has been dramatically and rapidly turned into one of Asia's most repressive cities and a police state. And he has, in the latest twists in his case, he has even been, it seems, denied the right to choose his own lawyer. He chose a British senior lawyer to represent him. The Court of Final Appeal upheld his right to do so, but the Hong Kong government has asked Beijing to, in their words, reinterpret the law, and it looks very likely that he will not be represented by his British lawyer. And so we can be sure that he will definitely not have a fair trial. He, as you say, is very likely to spend the rest of his life in prison. And for what? For championing democracy and freedom.
Wow. Now, the whole world has been watching as protests throughout China have been going on. And now they're relaxing COVID policies. No more QR codes, they say, to get on public transportation or testing to get into work. But what is really motivating this?
Well, I think it's very clear that the protests were about much more than just COVID. When you listen to what the protesters were chanting, it wasn't lift COVID restrictions. It was Xi Jinping step down, CCP step down. We want freedom and democracy. So, and they were, I think, the largest scale and clearest protests for freedom that we've seen across China since the Tiananmen Square protest of 1989. And that's really significant.
Well, and so it is significant, but where does it go? Well, I mean, how much impact are these protests really having on the communist stranglehold on the country?
I think time will tell. What I think is significant is that although the protests have largely stopped, the Chinese authorities did actually respond to some of the demands specifically related to COVID, and they've lifted many of the restrictions. And that was something that was almost inconceivable to imagine the party giving in to the demands of protesters, but they have at least partially done so, particularly in relation to COVID. And that will send the message that protests can have some effect, and that the party's authority perhaps can be challenged in ways that we might not have imagined. I think it also probably weakens Xi Jinping's status in the eyes of some of the other factions in his party. The long-term consequences, time will tell.
How much is this responding to a popular revolt, and how much of it is responding to, Apple making noise about moving some of its production to other countries in the hemisphere, like Vietnam?
I think it's probably a combination of both. I mean, the party is always nervous when the people rise up and protest, but of course it is also very concerned about the economy and about attracting foreign investment. So I think it would have been a reaction to both those factors.
He is Benedict Rogers, co-founder and chief executive of Hong Kong Watch and author of The China Nexus. Benedict Rogers, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Barbecue, bags, brews, and just everyday use on your driveway or patio may have taken a toll on the old pavement this summer. Time to clean those dirty, oil-stained areas before winter arrives. And no mess is too big or too small for Cabino Environmental. Homeowners and businesses use Cabino Oil Stain Remover.